Combat in tabletop RPGs can be a blast, but let's face it, sometimes it just doesn't fit the vibe you're looking for. Maybe it feels too slow, too predictable, or not tactical enough. If you've ever felt this frustration, today's video is for you. We're diving into two iconic RPG combat systems, 5e Dungeons & Dragons and Traveler. Welcome back to Guys Night Gaming, where we play games and build things. So the problem we're tackling today is finding a combat system that matches a game style that you would prefer to play. Maybe you're after something more cinematic and heroic, or perhaps you like a more gritty realism with higher stakes. The good news is that there is a fix. There are games for each style. Choosing the right game, Dungeons & Dragons and Traveler offer dramatically different combat systems, and understanding how they work can help you decide which one's for you. So let's go ahead and we'll break those down here. First up is 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Its combat is designed for heroic storytelling, very cinematic. We'll go through some steps to kind of break it down on how it works. So there's turn structure, it's turn-based structure, combat's divided into rounds, players act in initiative order, and then you can choose to do an action, bonus action, and a movement on your turn. This structure is easy to learn, it keeps things in order. Then we'll go into role-driven success, so that means you're rolling dice to see if you succeed. Attack rolls determine hits, you roll d20, and then your character will have modifiers that you add to that roll. You compare the results to, say, a target's armor class, and then that damage roll is where you get the excitement if you beat that armor class. And you get to roll the damage for, say, like a big fireball spell where it does a lot of damage. You go into tactical variety. 5th edition, positioning does matter because we're using a grid here most of the time. Abilities like flanking, attacks of opportunity, and spell effects actually reward strategic movement, and that's why we typically see people using grids. And then the customization with just all the classes. I mean, there's dozens of classes, subclasses, there's feats. Players can fine-tune their characters for combat. Like a ranger is going to feel much different than a barbarian and how they play. So D&D 5e's combat shines when you want like an epic, teamwork-driven battle with lots of different creative options that work together. So now we will hop into the far future. We'll hop into Traveler, where combat trades the cinematic flair of D&D with gritty realism. The stakes are much higher in Traveler, and every decision typically matters quite a bit. So lethality and realism in Traveler's combat isn't about those heroic hits and stuff, the big fireball and whatnot. It's about survival, because the enemies are deadly and your decisions matter. Damage actually reduces, instead of like a health, it reduces your physical stats, which then in turn makes you do worse on some rolls, like strength, dexterity, and endurance. And that hitting 0 on any stats means that you're out. Instead of an AC, we have armor that absorbs damage. So unlike D&D's armor class system, armor is actually armor in Traveler and absorbs damage instead of making you harder to hit. If an attack exceeds your armor, the number of your armor, the leftover damage is what directly affects your stats. And then you have many different skills that go into like combat. Combat is skill driven, uses mechanics like medic. You can heal people. You can have a tactics skill to assess the battlefield. You got positioning, line of sight, cover. Those are all critical. There's another skill and an action for leadership, so you can actually improve the roles of your team. But if you do bad on that roll, you can actually take away from your team. So that's where it gets really, really hairy, and you really got to make the right decision. Equipment variety. So in Traveler, it's guns, explosives, and tech typically dominates. Range, weapons, you got ammunition you need to take care of. Situational awareness also plays a significant role, and that emphasizes realism over the spectacle that you're going to see with D&D 5e. So I'd say overall, Traveler's combat's perfect for those who want a high stakes decision kind of play style and with a more grounded approach to the combat. So we'll compare the two systems now that we've went over some of these points. How do these stack up against each other? I think that really depends on your play style. You could like one over the other. That's kind of why I'm going over this now. My preference at this point in my tabletop RPG journey, you could say, is the gritty realism. I played many years of D&D and have kind of moved on from it at this point, although I do want to go back. But the accessibility of D&D is designed for beginners in mind. D&D 5e's mechanics are intuitive. Rolling a d20 for nearly every check, attack, or saving throw makes it super easy to grasp. Redefined class features also guide players in making effective combat decisions, even if they're new to this sort of play, like an RPG. Traveler, with its 2d6 skill system, it's a little more complex. It has more interlocking mechanics. Traveler demands a little bit more from the player, so you really got to know what you can do and what is going to be good for the group. It rewards that familiarity with the rules and the willingness to engage with its more granular approach to combat and basic survival within it. Pacing-wise, D&D, while D&D's combat, it can be cinematic and exciting. It can also take some time, especially at the higher levels when players have multiple abilities to imagine. I can just think back to my old campaign, zombie-infested place. My cleric just, he's got all these spells, and all these spells are super powerful, and he just wipes the board of all these zombies and stuff. So that's kind of what it ends up being like, and you really got to know how to adjust your monsters if you're a DM. But if you love the grand, drawn-out battles with dramatic stakes, the pacing might feel like something you'd want to do. Traveler is designed to be fast and more brutal in the encounters. Combat rarely drags on, and its lethality ensures usually a quick resolution, whether it's the enemy or your character. The faster pace is ideal for groups who want combat to feel more immediate and dangerous, and also just like faster play. Tactics and strategy. So D&D strategy often revolves around synergy between classes, combining spells, abilities, and positioning to maximize that effectiveness of the group. Players are encouraged to think creatively. For example, imagine you're on top of a tower, and you have a wizard in the group, and the tower is collapsing. They cast Grease, and the enemy fails his roll, and he goes sliding off the edge. Things like that. That's really what it rewards in that kind of game. Area of effect spells like Fireball can devastate huge clusters of enemies, forcing opponents to rethink their positioning as well. Where Traveler's tactics focus more on survival. Every action has weight. For instance, in a shootout aboard a derelict space station, taking cover behind a bulkhead can mean the difference between life and death. Your player might choose to use the reaction to duck out, the line of sight, or to throw a grenade to neutralize multiple enemies. Because the damage is so much more dangerous, you got to consider those options a little bit more. Then there's resource management, like conserving ammo. That also adds to the tension. I think another big difference of these two is the tone of each system and the immersion that it provides. D&D offers the cinematic, larger-than-life experience where players can become basically legendary heroes. They're not just the everyday man. And that's where you can picture, your guy holding a shield, a flaming sword, and he's about to fight a dragon. And the dragon's like 10 stories taller than him. That's the kind of thing you can picture with D&D. Where Traveler is grounded in realism. It has a gritty and more immersive experience. It's like a small skirmish. Say you're rappelling like pirates on a cargo freighter. What you do in that moment could have lasting consequences, as far as like if your engineer gets killed and your ship gets messed up and you can't fly anywhere, so you're stuck in that space. Well, what decisions led to that situation? It can really affect you and then affect the entire group that way as well. So I tend to like that play style a little bit better. Customization and progression for these games. D&D character growth is tied to level. Offers a steady stream of new abilities, spells, and feats if you're using feats. It encourages long-term play in a sense of achievement, but again, long-term play can get tiresome. It can take a long time, and there's not really a lot of campaigns, like modules out there that lean towards the higher levels besides the most recent Vecna module. For Traveler, progression is skill-based and less linear. Characters improve through practice, training, experience, reflecting the game's grounded design. This approach is a little more flexible, but it's less flashy than the D&D's level system. So, just like any tabletop, I think each system excels in different ways. And if you want creativity, teamwork, D&D is going to have you covered on that. I'm not saying you can't have that in Traveler, but D&D excels at that. But if you're after realism, tactical depth, Traveler might be a good match for you. And it's just different, from the typical D&D play system, so that's nice. So the original problem that I had or wanted to present here is finding a combat system specifically that fits your gaming style, because typically that's a large part of the tabletop RPG. Some people are uncomfortable RPing, so combat is kind of heavy a lot of the time. If you want heroic battles with creative tactics, that's D&D 5e. If you prefer high stakes, realism, tactical depth, Traveler is a great option, but there's some other ones out there too that are really good as well. And it's one that's what I'm currently playing now as a player. I'm typically a forever GM. No matter your choice, the key is finding what excites you and your group. And you just want to have fun. That's it for this week. Subscribe, like, and share. Let me know in the comments which system you'd choose and why. I hope you learned something. I hope you play something, and I will see you next time.